Picture this. It's the 1930s, and two nations are heading to war over a huge, desolate piece of South American wilderness called the Grand Chaco. It was a brutal, bloody conflict for sure, but the thing that really decided the war, well, it wasn't the number of soldiers or tanks. It was a secret weapon, a map. But not a map drawn with ink. Oh no, this was a map written into the land itself, a code that only a very select few could actually read.
And this is really the core mystery of the Chaco War. On the one hand, you've got the official maps from that time. All clean lines, clearly defined rivers, and neat little borders. You know, a picture of order and control. But then on the other hand, you have the reality on the ground. A featureless, hostile landscape that the soldiers literally called the Green Hell. This was a place that seemed to actively fight back against being mapped.
So that begs a pretty big question, right? How could the maps be so unbelievably wrong? I mean, how could two modern armies fight a war over a territory that, for all intents and purposes, didn't really exist on paper? The whole thing was a complete cartographic illusion. And look, the problem wasn't just that the maps were a little inaccurate. They were a total mirage. They showed a static, predictable world that had absolutely no resemblance to the reality, a reality that was constantly changing, and one that was incredibly hostile to the soldiers who were trapped inside it. In the Chaco, the ground itself was a lie. It was a constantly shifting landscape with zero trustworthy reference points. Now, for an army, this is way more than just a logistical nightmare. It's an existential crisis. I mean, how do you plan an attack, or secure a supply line, or even just find your way back to your own base when you can't even trust the earth beneath your feet? Okay, so you might be wondering, well, why couldn't they just, make better maps? What was it about the Chaco that made it so unique that the standard surveying techniques, the very methods that were used to map entire continents, failed so completely? Well, military mapmaking really depends on a technique called triangulation. What surveyors do is they use fixed points, like mountain peaks, to create a whole network of super accurate measurements. But the Chaco, it offered nothing fixed. It was this giant flat plain with no peaks to speak of. Its rivers would just show up during massive floods and then completely vanish into dust during the dry season. The entire landscape was in constant motion, which meant any measurement they took was pretty much useless almost as soon as they wrote it down. This quote just perfectly captures the whole problem. The surveyors were trying to apply the rigid, predictable logic of mathematics to a landscape that was behaving more like a living thing, dynamic, fluid, and completely unpredictable. It was an impossible task. It was like trying to measure a ghost. The conclusion here was pretty stark and unavoidable. The established methods weren't just not good enough, they were completely useless.